Welcome to this video demonstration of Blueprint Migrate. In this demo, we're going to show migration from Automation Anywhere or A360 to Microsoft Power Automate Desktop. Traditionally, when a company wanted to switch RPA vendors, they had to manually rewrite all of their automations. It's basically the same as when they were first written, except instead of working from a PDD, you're working from an example bot. But in both cases, you're writing all of the code. Blueprint lets you do an automated RPA migration. In this case, you start with most of the new code already written. That is your starting point. The developer now finishes the rest of the code and tests. A Blueprint automated migration typically reduces between 60 to 75% of the overall migration work. For this demonstration, I have 18 fairly large A360 automations. I've already analyzed them using Blueprint's Migration Analysis and Planning product, or MAP, and I encourage you to go watch the video demo for that product. In this demo, we're going to focus on one of the 18 automations, the one called GJ Upload, which is considered a fairly large A360 automation. From our map analysis, Blueprint converts 98.5% of the code. This is a typical conversion rate for Blueprint in the high 90s. The remaining work for the developer to do is to fix 9 compiler errors, to complete 67 to-do items, mostly the few lines of code that Blueprint could not convert, and when testing, there's probably some selectors that are not going to work, and they need to be respied. So you should think of this as Blueprint writing over 5,000 lines of code instead of the developer having to do it. So Blueprint's map product lets us know all of this information and more for all of the automations, not just this one. But for this demo, let's jump into the migration product and see how it works. Here I am in Blueprint Migrate. Everything's already been imported, and we can see the GJ Upload automation that we're going to focus on for this particular demo. I can also see that the GJ Upload automation was originally migrated from Automation Anywhere Enterprise v11 to A360 because I can still see a Metabot folder in here. With a couple of logics, add days and format string with date time. The way that all of this was imported, I just pick the project and say import from Automation360. Then I go pick the file that was exported from Automation360. When I open that up, Blueprint parses that zip file and shows me all of the contents of it. In other words, all of the task bots, including the main, which always has a blue solid color. Blueprint recommends what I should import. In this case, everything's been checked, but I of course can uncheck or check as I please before I hit the import button. And that's how simple it is to bring legacy RPA content into Blueprint for conversion. After it's been brought in, each task bot is represented in Blueprint as what we call a process. If I click it, you can see Blueprint also renders the process graphically, allowing us to preview it if we need to. And for each step, on the right side, I can see the details for that particular step from the Legacy RPA tool, but also I can see how Blueprint converts it into Blueprint's Common Object Model, or COM, which facilitates our conversion to Power Automate Desktop. Blueprint also automatically generates what we call rule opportunities, or opportunities to configure or tailor the conversion. We have different types of rules, but right here I can see under Custom Actions that I have a couple of unmapped actions and I have a couple of DLL calls. I'm going to take care of this particular capture window custom action, which came from this package called App Integration. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enable this rule. Once I've done that, how do I want it to be resolved in PAD? I'm just going to have it go to an external flow. I could put the ID and name of the flow I want it to go to, but if I leave it blank, Blueprint will automatically create for me a new external flow called capture window, and Blueprint will auto-populate this rule so that in the future, as long as this is enabled, all uses of that action will call that common external flow. I'm going to save that choice. So Blueprint's very powerful in terms of configuring or tailoring your conversions. So let's export this over to PAD. I pick the main task bot, and up in the top right, I'm going to pick Export to Power Automate Desktop. Blueprint has a rules wizard that guides me through the steps of setting up rules, but I've already configured the rule that I want, so I'm going to bypass the wizard at this time. I get a rule summary page, so there's that rule that I enabled and I'm going to use. Continuing, the last step, it shows me a preview of the call tree or dependency tree that's going to go out of all the former taskbots. This is obviously a very flat call tree, but they can get extremely complex and deep. And I just click continue. That makes a live connection to my Power Platform. I can see the export job over here in our jobs table. And when the export's complete, the status will change to completed. So let's go over to Power Automate Desktop and see what arrived. So here we are in Power Automate Desktop. I'll refresh. And here's my flows. As you can see, here is that automation that I brought over. Plus, because of that rule I configured, there's my new common capture window flow. So let's open up this automation. And here's the code that Blueprint converted. All of the logic, actions, all the exception handling, the structure in terms of subflows, all of the required variables, and the selectors having been converted. Both UI desktop, which you see here, but also web browser, if our automation had browser interaction. You recall that that unmapped action, capture window, was used 5 times in a taskbot called Mount Shared. So I will just search here for capture window, and here it is. It's now in a Mount Shared Drive subflow, and it has 5 uses. If I double click, we can see that Blueprint has replaced that unmapped action with a call to an external flow that you saw created, all done automatically. So that's just to give you an example of the power of Blueprint's conversion rules when you're converting an entire estate of automations in an organization. So in terms of repairing things, there are, of course, the compiler errors we talked about as usual in the list down below. If you want to see your to-do list as a developer, you type to-do. And here's all the to-do items I need to take care of. As you go through and fix your to-do items, there's other information that Blueprint injects. One is SRC or source comments. So that's when some of the conversions are complex or tricky. For example, we will put in, for reference purposes, the source action with all of its details from A360 as referenced. Another set of guidance we have are info comments. If you type info, you can see lots of those. So here is one describing why we have put a PowerShell script in here. Notice it also gives you a reference back to the exact line number in A360. So fix 9 compiler errors, 67 to-dos, and respy some percentage of those selectors instead of writing over 5,000 lines of code. That's the value that Blueprint provides. These are the features that we showed you, grouped into these feature categories. But there's a lot more in this Migrate product, so I encourage you to see our other videos or reach out for more information at info@blueprintsys.com. Thank you for watching.